in the indictment.
And we begin with this breaking news that we have been following for you all afternoon. A verdict has been reached in the A.J. Armstrong capital murder trial. After 2 mistrials, this third jury has found him guilty.
Armstrong is now sentenced to life with a possibility of parole after 40 years. And we have team coverage on today's verdict. We begin with the only reporter in Houston who's covered this case from the very beginning, ABC 13's Courtney Fisher.
Yeah, guys, it took jurors only 10 hours yesterday into today to decide that A.J. Armstrong did, in fact, kill his parents when he was 16 years old 7 years ago. We have video of that verdict coming down just about 2 hours ago now. Picture this, A.J. Armstrong is in jail right now. Of course, we know he will serve life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. His wife tearful in the courtroom as she mouthed something to him. He was led away in handcuffs after being fingerprinted. We spent time in the last hour talking to the prosecutors on this case. John Jordan and Ryan Trask have worked this case now for more than a year. They were the ones who tried it in that second trial we know ended in a hung jury, and they got 15 out of 15 jurors, 12 jurors plus 3 alternates, to say that A.J. Armstrong was guilty. And they spent time with those jurors. They told us about what it meant for them to convict this young man. They said they methodically worked through the evidence yesterday and today. Ryan Trask telling us that these jurors actually made flow charts of the evidence on the wall, something he said he had never seen in his career. And they say that it was the 911 call, AJ's interrogation tape that lasted just under an hour, the test fire. Remember, he fired a gun into his bedroom floor weeks before the murders, and also tried to set his parents' house on fire while they were home. Those were the things that mattered to these jurors, not, in fact, that new blood evidence that was really talked about over the last couple of months that delayed this trial. They say that for this jury, it was clear. They just wanted to make sure they got it right, because think about this. This young man now will be spending the rest of his life away from his wife and son. And prosecutors, of course, say they got it right. Now, defense says they'll appeal. Prosecutors saying that they are confident this case will hold up. And they also told us it was an emotional day for us. Here is how DA Kim Ott put it.
Antonio Sr. and Dawn Armstrong died because they were trying to be good parents, because they wanted their children to do right, not to lie, to work, to be law-abiding, contributing adults. And for that, they paid with their lives. And so today, we've now seen what a murderer looks like. It can be anyone, and the fact that it was their own son is it's a trauma. It is a tragedy for the whole family.
They appeared to be a perfect family with 3 beautiful kids and a thriving business. But things started going wrong in the weeks before they were killed. Behind closed doors, what led to the murders of ex-NFL player Antonio Armstrong Sr. and wife Dawn. In Houston, it was 1:40 a.m. on July 29th, 2016, when 16-year-old Antonio A.J. Armstrong called 911 from his family's Bel Air area home on Palmetto Drive. "I just heard 2 gunshots in my parents' room," he told the dispatcher. "Will you please hurry?" Antonio Jr. said he was hiding in the closet on his 3rd floor bedroom. "But my sister's downstairs on the 2nd floor. She's 12. The teen confirmed his dad had a gun in the nightstand or under the bed in his parents' 2nd floor bedroom. At one point during the call, Antonio Jr. muttered to himself, "It's all my fault." When police arrived, he ran downstairs and turned off the alarm to let them in. They went upstairs and discovered that Antonio Sr. and Dawn Armstrong had been shot in their bed and pillows had been placed over their heads. Let me pause right there. Now, they say when pillows are put over a deceased person's head when they're murdered, that's a personal crime because the person who committed that crime doesn't want to see their loved one in that state. So that right there lets you know that it was a personal crime. Now it continues. Don was already dead from 2 gunshot wounds. Antonio Sr. was rushed to the hospital with a single gunshot wound, but doctors weren't able to save him. The killer left a note scribbled in large letters downstairs on a kitchen counter next to the murder weapon. I have been watching you for a long time. Come get me. Investigators found no sign of forced entry. They separated Antonio Jr. and his sister, Kara, bagged their hands for gunshot residue, and put them in patrol cars. Antonio Jr. called his older brother, Josh, who, according to his girlfriend, grabbed his shotgun and ran out frantically from his nearby apartment. When he got to his parents' home, Houston police officers wouldn't tell him anything or let him go inside. He was upset. His parents had just been murdered, a homicide detective said. Antonio Sr.'s mother, Kay Winston, also rushed to the house with her daughter. Winston was shocked when he saw her grandkids in patrol cars and learned Antonio Jr. was a suspect. Let me tell you something. If AJ did something like this, it had to be drugs, she told investigators. He was brought to HPD headquarters the next morning, where he was interviewed for several hours before being charged with capital murder. It would take 7 years and 3 trials to finally get justice for Antonio Sr. and Don. Their own son, 23, was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years. This is so tragic. That from the outside looking in, they had a perfect family, living in a nice community. The father was a successful businessman. He's an ex-NFL football player, played with the 49ers. And from the outside looking in, everything looked normal. But you never know what's going on. That goes back to what we talked about that mental health. You just never know what's going on. You raise your kids to be the best they can be. You want them to get an education. But I think when they become adults, they have their own mind. They'll go their own way. You know? And a lot of times you want to be strict with them. But, you know, a lot of times they just don't want to listen. They want to do their own thing. Antonio Armstrong Sr. grew up in Houston's 5th Ward, where he and his 4 siblings were raised in the church. He played football at Texas A&M before being drafted by the San Francisco 49ers in '95. After a couple of years in the NFL, Armstrong Sr. joined the Canadian Football League. Along the way, he met Dawn at church, married her, and adopted her son, Josh. Their second child, Antonio Jr., was born in Canada before the family moved back to Houston, where they welcomed their daughter, Kara. Beautiful children and beautiful wife, paternal grandmother Kay Winston said. The Armstrongs moved to the Bel Air area and opened first-class gym. Antonio Sr. also worked as a motivational speaker and served as associate pastor at his mother's Spirit of Life Church. We were very close. We spent a lot of time together at church, my home, and their home, Winston said. Like a lot of Texans, their lives revolved around faith, family, and football. Both boys played, and Antonio Sr. coached their teams. Antonio Jr. was a strong athlete with dreams of playing in the NFL like his dad. Very competitive, he was good at football, basketball, and track, Winston said. The kids were sweet, bright, and did well in school, according to the grandmother. All 3 of them attended Kincaid, a top-rated private school where tuition cost over $30,000. Man, they did everything for these kids. And they said the older brother had some type of mental condition as well. During the investigation, they thought that the older brother was a possible suspect, but later on he was ruled out. Now, in the months before the murders, things began to unravel. The Armstrongs were frustrated with both sons. Antonio Jr. had failed out of Kincaid. In text messages, Don accused him of smoking marijuana, drinking, and lying to them over and over again. "I'm so disappointed in you," she said in one text. Josh, meanwhile, was having his own issues in college and later admitted he'd been smoking marijuana daily. Family members said he dropped out of Blinn and moved back to his parents' home. He was different, Winston testified. His hair wasn't kept up and his clothes were dirty. Kara testified that Josh seemed out of it, and she would hear him in the bathroom talking to himself. Damn, that's a red flag right there. Now, they both said Armstrong kicked Josh out of the house after he had a party with marijuana and booze while they were out of town. Despite Josh's issues, text messages showed he had a very close relationship with Don. She often confided in him about her frustration with Antonio Jr. and even leaned on him for support. "I don't know what I did wrong as a mom. I just wanted the best for my babies." One text to Josh in early June said, "I'm trying not to feel like a failure. I love you, Mom. Be strong. We will succeed," Josh replied. He was working at the family's gym and had started taking college classes again. Don found Josh an apartment and bought furniture and other items for it. "You're too good to me. Thank you, Mama," Josh texted on July 17th after she sent him some photos of a table. "Love you, son," Don replied. Man, this story is sad. Now, while Josh seemed to be turning things around, Antonio Jr. was getting worse. 2 days before the murders, he put gasoline in a bottle of rubbing alcohol and set a fire on the stairwell outside his parents' bedroom. His dad put out the fire before it spread. Don texted a photo of the burned carpet to Josh. Days before the murders, Antonio Jr. also fired the murder weapon through a pillow and blanket and covered up the hole in the bedroom floor with a pile of socks. Purely coincidental, prosecutor John Jordan asked in closing arguments during his third trial. Jurors said those two events combined with cell phone records that showed Antonio Jr. was awake and moving around the house beginning at 1:09 a.m., the morning of the murders. He made the 911 call 31 minutes later. They also cited alarm records that showed nobody else entered or exited the house that night. Defense attorneys spent much of the trial trying to prove that Josh was a more likely suspect. Now, Josh is the older brother. Forensic psychiatrists, both sides, examined hundreds of pages of medical records that documented Josh's downward spiral in the months after the murders. His ex-girlfriend, Hannah, testified that Josh never showed any signs of mental health issues before the murders, but a few weeks after, he became very paranoid that the killer would come after him. He even made up a list of people who could have been the killers, including her. I want to be very, very clear about this. Josh was never like this before. This completely ruined his life, Hannah told jurors at the trial. About 6 months after the murders, Josh was voluntarily admitted to Ben Taub and treated for depression and paranoia brought on by PTSD and trauma caused by his parents' deaths. Josh's mental health continued to deteriorate with repeated trips to psychiatric centers over the next few years. By 2018, medical records described him as a full-blown psychotic with schizophrenia. He was hearing voices and believed he was God or the devil. He eventually became catatonic and couldn't or wouldn't answer doctors' questions. Family members said he disappeared and no one knows where he is. Yeah, I'm gonna end it right there. This story is very sad. And rest in peace to the mom and dad. You guys tried the best you could. I mean, that's all you can do is try. You don't know how these kids are gonna turn out. You just gotta leave it in God's hands. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.